ערוץ 7.
Hello and welcome to Life Lessons. This is Judy Simon. You are tuned in to Israel National Radio, Arutz Sheva. Today, I have invited onto the show actually a very close friend of mine. Her name is Batya Kroopnick, and she has just published her very first novel, For Better and for Worse, An Israel Odyssey, which is already getting amazing reviews. Batya herself made Aliyah from Chicago. She's going to tell us her story in a minute. Batya, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here today.
It is my pleasure, absolutely my pleasure. Batya, as you know, we begin our show by talking about grandparents. Would you please tell us a little bit about your grandparents?
Sure. The grandparents on my father's side were both from Russia. They came to America when they were in their early years of marriage. When they came to Ellis Island, the last name was Schneiderman, but at Ellis Island, as you know, very many Jews that came abroad from Europe had to change their last names. They were considered too long or too Jewish or I don't know what, so they ended up changing their last name to Snyder. I didn't see those grandparents very much because they moved to California. My grandparents on my mother's side, my grandfather was from Poland, my grandmother was from Romania. They also came over. They were younger. My grandmother, I know, was religious. When she was in Romania, her family came. She had a family of 13 kids.
Wow.
Not all of them survived back then. Many of the children did die of diseases and other things. But her family that were still surviving came, and she was religious, but they got to America, and like the story goes with many families, Jewish families that come over, it was very hard to keep Shabbat and kosher and all the other things that go along with being religious. So that kind of went to the wayside, and they no longer were religious when they got there. That was my nanny. We called her Nani, my sister and brother and I. Nani, and her husband my grandfather was Papa. That's how we knew them. My nanny was very much a part of our lives. She was very close to my mother, and she would be our babysitter. We used to go there to visit a lot. They lived in Chicago. And that's where we grew up, basically, in Chicago.
Your dad grew up in California?
No, my dad also grew up he also grew up in Chicago, but his parents, my grandparents on his side, and his sisters all moved out to California. A lot of his family moved out to California, some of his aunts and uncles, and we stayed in Chicago.
Okay, so your parents met in Chicago, married there. They were both Chicagoans. And they raised a family in Chicago.
Correct. Yes, we lived in West Rogers Park, which was a pretty Jewish neighborhood. Actually, the schools that I went to, both grammar school and high school, was predominantly Jewish, not religious, but Jewish. We did have some Koreans, and we had a lot of other groups there too. But in fact, I remember in Boone School a very funny story. My grammar school. We boys and girls went to school together, and one of the boys was an Armenian boy. And whenever the Jewish kids would take off for the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we had to just give a note from our parents saying we weren't going to be there. And most of the kids didn't go, whether they were religious or not. Most of the Jews didn't go.
An excuse to take off
and this
school.
Armenian boy decided to get on the bandwagon, and he would write notes from his parents in his own handwriting saying, this boy, I'm not going to say his name, but anyway, it was a very non-Jewish name, is going to be away for the Jewish holiday today. I remember all the teachers would just look at him like, oh, this is quite interesting. But that's what it was like in our schools.
So, Batya, you grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, though your family was not religious. You went to a public school, but did you go to some sort of an after-school Hebrew school program or anything?
So we did go. My brother, I have two siblings, an older brother and sister, and we all went to Sunday school at a Reformed synagogue, and we did go to Hebrew school 2 afternoons a week. I learned maybe a little bit from the Hebrew school, but it was very, very, very basic. But we did go to Sunday school. We learned, the basics also there of Judaism.
Batya, did you feel connected to your own Judaism?
Well, in my family, we would celebrate some of the holidays to a certain extent. You know, for Passover, we did the first part of the Seder and up to the meal, and, you know, then that was it. And for Hanukkah, we did light candles and have presents. We didn't really go to pray at the synagogue except for on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Mm-hmm.
Although I remember I was in the choir at the Temple Menorah in Chicago. So on Shabbat, on Friday nights, we would come and sing, you know, with the microphone and the organ and everything. Mm-hmm. And I remember then my parents had to come one Friday night because they wanted to hear me. And I don't know, as a child, I have no idea how they felt about that. I'm sure they were feeling a little bit funny, like they'd never really come to services before on Friday night. But basically, Judaism wasn't really the focus of our lives. We didn't have, you know, daily connections to it. We knew we were Jewish, and you know, my mother's big thing was to always marry somebody who was Jewish. That's the thing she really cared about the most. But because we kids didn't really feel that connected, that wasn't an important thing for us.
So, Batya, what was it that sparked your interest in Judaism?
That only came after I ended up going to Israel. I wasn't interested in becoming more religious or learning more about Judaism, but I ended up going to Israel. My friend from college was going, and we said, okay, well, I'll go too. In the end, we didn't end up going together. I ended up going on my own, and I had a friend who I knew from kindergarten who had become religious and moved to Israel, and she actually joined the army. She became more religious in Israel, but she did get closer to Judaism when we were in Chicago, and I said, I'll go visit her. And the visit turned out to be much more than just a visit. And when I got to Israel, I was really like, whoa, this is an amazing place. And one of my first impressions when I came to Israel was, oh my gosh, everybody around me here is Jewish. It was a very amazing feeling to me. I felt like I was just part of a huge, gigantic family, and everywhere I went, they were with me. I stayed with my friend, kindergarten friend, who lived in Jerusalem at the time. I stayed with her for a bit, and I just felt so connected all of a sudden to, really quickly, like within just a week or two, I felt like my whole soul, my neshama, my soul, my whole being was connected to this place, this country, these people. I couldn't explain it. I just really felt like I belonged in Israel.
Now, Batya, you're describing something. You know, you had a happy childhood. You knew you were Jewish. You didn't have a lot of negative feelings towards your Judaism. You were in the choir in your temple. And then when you're in a country where everybody's Jewish, it hits you. It affected you. It grabbed your soul, like you said. Why? Is it something
actually, the truth is I did not really feel so comfortable back in the States, in America. I kind of felt a little bit like I didn't fit in as much as everyone else around me seemed to. Like somehow I didn't feel like I was the same. I remember in college thinking, well, there's got to be a lot more to life than what I'm living right now. I couldn't explain what I was feeling like. I missed something, like something was missing or something. I was just different in some ways, you know.
Did you have any anti-Semitic experiences when you were young?
Well, actually, that's kind of like what I was about to just say, that there were quite a few different experiences that I had that kind of, in some ways, pushed me towards feeling more Jewish, because I had encountered quite a few anti-Semitic and disturbing experiences, both in grammar school and in college, and I felt more inclined to defend myself as a Jew and Judaism in general because of them. You know, things like, you know, I would see swastikas written on the lunchroom tables, or I remember once I was in somebody's house and she was giving us a tour, and there was a huge black swastika on the wall of her parents' bedroom. And I've been involved with, you know, Jewish jokes, kids that would say Jew jokes, like really horrible Jew jokes in front of us. Oh, you're not Jewish, are you? You know, things like that. Oh, you're Jewish, you don't look Jewish. And where do all you bad Jews go to when you die? And, you know, things like that I was like, whoa, like, what is this? And I think a lot of my Jewish identity was strengthened just by some of those anti-Semitic experiences. And when I got to Israel, I felt like I belong with the Jews. That's where I am. That's where I felt the best.
How did your parents feel about this sudden connection with Judaism and with Israel that wasn't the way they raised you, per se?
Right, exactly. And that was a bit of an issue because, well, my father came from a little bit more of a religious background. He was what you might consider not maybe conservative, between reform and conservative, if there is such a thing. My mother was completely reformed. So my father, it didn't bother him. But my mother was not so thrilled, even though she's the one who wanted us to only marry Jewish. I think it felt a little bit threatening to her, you know.
Meaning you're going to change, you're not going to be the same person, you're not going to accept her in your life anymore?
Yeah, well, I think also it kind of made her feel like, well, I kind of like passed them up, you know. I'm in a different place than they are, and maybe we won't relate the same anymore, which to me didn't make sense because I didn't feel any different. I just knew that I was becoming something more that I felt good about.
Mm-hmm.
And I believed that this was good for me, and I felt comfortable with it. And I think she just felt a little bit like, well, you're kind of moving away from us. But it didn't have to be that way, because that's not how I was feeling at the time. I think she just felt a little bit uncomfortable with it, and also she wasn't very happy about me being far away, physically far away either.
Right. So tell us about that Israel experience. You're staying with your friend that you knew since kindergarten. You meant it to be just a quick little trip to Israel with your friend. What happened?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I actually was planning to go on to Europe afterwards, on a backpacking trip, and then come back to my job. I actually had studied journalism in college. I'd always wanted to be a writer when I was young. I decided when I was about 10 that I wanted to start writing, and I would write little stories for myself. When I got to high school, I took a creative writing course. When I got to college, I decided to major in journalism. I worked in a newspaper for a while, and then I ended up coming to Israel after that, and I wasn't thrilled with the field of journalism. I was, being a newspaper reporter wasn't exactly where it was at for me. So after I came to Israel, I decided to quit being a journalist, and instead I became a religiously observant new Israeli immigrant, Ola Hadasha. And the reason that all happened was because when I got to Israel, I realized it was an emotional, not logical, not intellectual decisions. I just felt so connected to the land, the people, the country, the air, just everything about Israel. I felt like this was it. This is where I belong. And, the people were so real and so true and so open, and I just felt this is the place I want to be forever, and I want to know more about my heritage and my country and my people. And I went to this program in Sfat called Livnot Ulehibanot, which was based on it was set up for non-religious Jews all around the world. At the time, the program was a 3-month program for 20 to 30-year-olds. Basically, we learned about Judaism. We had hikes, tiyulim, they're called, hikes all around the country, and we helped do community projects in Sfat. It's located in Sfat, the northern part of Israel. And I just felt like, wow, I'm contributing to the land, and I'm learning about my religion, and I'm connecting to the people, and I loved it.
So the program was called Livnot Ulehibanot, which means to build and to be built up. It sounds like that's exactly what it did for you.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. We helped build the area, the country, and we also were being built in a, real sense, like a personal sense.
Right.
And it really was that. And, I felt myself connecting more to Judaism also. One of the things I really loved on that program was Shabbat. We would keep Shabbat, and we had a group of about 20 people, 20 of us, and we were responsible for doing everything that it took to get ready for Shabbat, which we had never experienced before. I had never experienced a real Shabbat. We did all the cooking, which was a real group effort, and it was actually a lot of fun. We all got together, we'd put music on, and we just, cook away in this big, huge kitchen. And then we got dressed up, which we never used to do on a Friday night, with whatever we happened to have with us from, just being there in Israel.
From the suitcase.
And
right?
we would light candles together, and we would go up on this huge roof, this flat roof overlooking all the mountains. It was beautiful, the sunset, all the mountains of, across from Sfat. And we would sing, some Hebrew Jewish songs for what's called Kabbalat Shabbat, the introduction to welcoming in the Shabbat. Then we'd all go together to the Abu Hav synagogue in Sfat, where after the regular community daven, we'd have the whole place to ourselves. And the director, Aaron Bolter, would conduct the service for us in the way that we could, relate to it and understand it, because we were all very limited in our Hebrew. And it was just amazing. And afterwards, we'd have huge meals together. We would sing and even bang our hands and our fists on the table to the tunes and to the rhythm of the songs we were singing. And it was just, and we would, have Divar Torah, a little bit about what was going on in that portion of the week in the Torah and how it relates to our everyday lives today and our modern lives. It was a very uplifting and real experience, and slowly I started to become more interested in what's all this Judaism about. What does it mean to be a Jew and a real Jew, in the sense of following the Torah and living the life that that we're meant to live as Jews, and especially in the land of Israel.
So when you finished that 3-month program, you weren't the same person you were before you started.
Exactly. I wanted to continue learning more, so I went to a seminary in Jerusalem called Machon Ora, and there I met somebody who I'm still very close to. Her name is Hannah Rubin Alsabel. At the time, she was Hannah Pupko. She was the director of the English program, the English part of Machon Ora in Jerusalem, and she was very wonderful. She was very open, and she didn't say you have to be like this and you have to be like that. She said, come as you are, learn with us, and walk away with whatever you can get out of this place. And I walked away from Machon Ora with much more than I had expected, because I wasn't interested in becoming a religious Jew. I just wanted to know more. But by the time I left Machon Ora, I also felt like, wow, this is for me. This is who I am. I want to live my life as a religious Jew. I want to remain in Israel. And I just felt really good about all of it.
And at what point did you realize that's it? I'm not going back.
So I had a ticket that was for 10 months to return back to the States after that. But at the end of the 10 months, there was no way that I was going to do that. I actually was supposed to go on to Europe and then go back. What I did was I canceled the ticket I had that was going back the one way, and I got a round-trip ticket. And when I went back to visit, it was like a 3-month visit. I was already keeping a little bit of kosher, and I was already interested in keeping Shabbat, which my roommate and I had decided consciously that we were going to keep Shabbat in Jerusalem, and I wanted to continue doing that. And when I got back there, it was not as easy as I would have wanted it to be. People were like, well, what's going on? You won't eat this, you won't eat that. And I was like, well, it's not that I won't, I can't. It's that I prefer not to. And keeping Shabbat was not easy when everyone around you wasn't. But that was what I felt like I really wanted to do, and I did for 3 months. My mother really tried hard to get me to stay. Her friend offered me a job, and they tried setting me up with some religious guy there. I had no interest in whatsoever. I know now that it was because they really were trying to get me to stay. But after 3 months, I came back to Israel on my return ticket, and I actually became the madricha, one of the counselors for the Livnot Ulihivanot program in Sfat. They asked me to come back and be one of the madrichot, one of the counselors, and that's what I did.
And then you married and built your life in Israel.
Well, after that, I rented an apartment in Yerushalayim after the Sfat program. After I was finished with the 3 months of being the counselor in Sfat, I went to Yerushalayim. I rented an apartment with some other girls. I went to Opan to learn Hebrew better. I worked at different jobs. And only about 5 years later, I'd been in Israel for 6 years already, then I got married to my husband, and we moved to the hills of Judea and Samaria to a yeshuv, a town called Beit El. We had 5 children, and basically that's where I am to this day here in Beit El. We just really love the community. When we came, was only 300 families. Now we have a community of about 1,200 families.
Wow.
Which is, approximately 7,000 or even maybe more now, 7,000, 8,000 people.
Incredible.
Really starting to develop here. This is where the dream that Yaakov had in the Torah, Jacob's dream with the ladder going up and down to heaven,
which we just read about in this past week's Torah portion.
Right, exactly. This is the spot that it all happened. Living in Judea and Samaria is just amazing in itself. There's so much Jewish history here that's from the Tanakh, from the Torah. There's so many things that happened in the Torah in this area, in Judea and Samaria. I mean, there is all over Israel for sure, but a lot of the stories that you learn about that happened way back then, thousands of years ago. In fact, here in Beit El, there's this water tower that you can go up on and look all around the country from the north to the south on a clear day, almost as well as Avraham Avinu did.
Batya, you had mentioned that when you started getting connected to Israel, your family was hesitant. Your father was less so, but your mother was very hesitant about you living so far away, and maybe you had become a different person. But after years of seeing how happy you were and raising your family, did your mom ever come around? Did your family ever become comfortable with your decision to live in Israel?
Oh, so actually that's a good question. In the beginning, I was the one who would go to visit in the States, but then after I had children, my mother would come. In fact, for quite a few years, she came for a visit every year. Yeah, she understood that this was going to be where I was making my life, and that I felt very good here, and this was my home. And that's a hard part, to say, well, now that is your home instead of where you grew up. But I wasn't one for putting things into anybody's face or trying to push my ways or ideas on anyone. And we ended up managing okay. My parents were very happy that I was happy, and my brother and sister, my brother's motto was, well, whatever makes you happy. We all managed okay. It really went fine, and I think for anybody out there who ever wants to make Aliyah and is worried about, well, I'm not going to be able to do that because my family won't forgive me or we won't be close anymore, my answer to you is that there are many ways today to remain close. It's not just sending letters through the mail anymore. There's so many different ways of being in touch today and bring you closer. Even Skype is like you're right there in the same room. And if there's a will to stay close with the family, then it will happen. And when you stand up for what you really believe and you really want for yourself, people come around and they respect you for that, and eventually things do work themselves out.
So it's good. It's a good life that you chose for yourself.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we come to the end of the first half of the show. We're going to talk in the second half of the show about the novel that you wrote. And the novel is called For Better and For Worse, an Israel Odyssey. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
ערוץ 7.
We're back with the second half of Life Lessons. We're in the middle of a conversation with Batya Kroopnick. Batya is the author of the book that just came out, For Better and For Worse, an Israel Odyssey. And it's sort of a semi-autobiographical, at least, because I see a lot of the stories are similar to Batya's own life, about her coming to Israel. And I'm going to read to you from the back of the book. The moment she lands in Israel, 22-year-old Shelley Kaplan's whole life changes. For Better and For Worse is the unforgettable story of Shelley's inspiring, amusing, perilous, and at times painful transformation from secular American Jew to passionate Israeli. Shelley's newfound faith and love for her people and country carry her through the highs and lows of life in the Holy Land. Jump-started by childhood encounters with anti-Semitism, her powerful and moving 25-year journey through the land of Israel reveals the beauty, magic, and spirit of Zion as she becomes deeply attached to the dynamic Jewish homeland, its rich heritage, and remarkable people. Unforgettable characters and vivid scenes unfold as Shelley relates her captivating adventures to a small group of women in an American rehabilitation center where she's recovering from a car accident. Her intrigued listeners follow her through her first days in Israel, her marriage to Yehuda in Jerusalem, and how the two of them raise their Sabra children with Zionist ideals in a religious settlement town in the hills of Judea and Samaria. New immigrant struggles, wars, terrorism, pleas to return to the U.S., nothing can dim the light glowing vibrantly within Shelley. But when a horrific national crisis threatens to tear the people of Israel apart, she's tested as never before. Your heart will be pulled in many directions as the spirited and determined Shelley discovers herself and her new yet ancient home as she and Israel go forward together with ups and downs, the good and the bad, for better and for worse. Wow, Batya draws you in, just the description, you know. I want to tell you that I'm almost finished reading the book. I'm on page 362 right now. And it's amazing. You're a very good writer. You're a wonderful, wonderful storyteller. And you can't help but be drawn in to Shelley and to her love for this land and her, I guess you might even call it this overwhelming love for this land, because even when she meets negative people and even when negative things happen and even when she herself starts to doubt, there's just this draw, this pull that the reader wants to say to Shelley, don't give up the fight. You're doing okay. Keep going. You know, it's really, really a beautiful and well-written book. The first question that I wanted to ask you is about your decision to write the book at all.
Well, first of all, For Better and for Worse, an Israel Odyssey is based on real people and true events. And it shows an inside glimpse of Israel through the experiences of an Ola Hadasha, a new immigrant, over a period of 25 years. So it presents a positive yet realistic perspective of what it's like to live in the land of Israel, fall in love with the country and the people, and, as you were saying, cope with the many struggles that come with being an Israeli, especially a new immigrant. So how did I get into writing this? Well, it was pretty clear to me when I decided I was going to write a book that Israel would be the topic that I would write about. I wanted to tell the world all about this amazing place that I loved and felt so close to. And I thought I could help show people out there what it was really like over here. These days, people hear about Israel and they think of all the, slanted news reports or the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic politicians, what they have to say, and it's not true. They don't really know the inside story of what it's really like to be here in Israel. And I wanted to tell about all the extraordinary people and incredible experiences that I was having and have had just by living in this country. And so I began writing stories based on the uplifting life I was living in the Holy Land. It took a long time, this book, because I wrote it over a period of years, but I did take breaks. One time I took a break from writing for about 2.5 years, and when I got back into writing the book, I realized that I needed to change it, because stories only about how great Israel is not the whole picture, even though there's so much good to write about Israel. The reality is that life everywhere, anywhere, even here in Israel, isn't all roses. The longer I lived in the country, the more I realized that we have our share of complications and troubles here, which affect our lives in one way or another. And I felt that that side of Israel couldn't be ignored and should be included in the book. But along with that, I wanted to show how Israelis, both old and new, cope with the problems that we face here, how we really live a special and unique life that's only in Israel, and why, no matter what, we as Jews should be here. I'm happy to say that I had my first book review.
Oh.
It came out a few weeks ago online. And
you want to read it to us?
Okay, so I think she got what I was trying to do with this book. Some of what she wrote went like this. Kroopnick's stories faithfully capture the only in Israel feeling. For Better and for Worse, an Israel Odyssey is an extremely accessible introduction to what it really feels like to live in Israel and why people stay, even when the challenges become formidable. So I think these two lines do a pretty good job explaining my book. I have a harder time explaining it. I never really know what to say when people ask, so what's your book about? So I usually just say, oh, it's about Israel. Okay, actually, the book is about just about all of us who were either born in Israel or came on Aliyah, probably had at one time or another some of the thrilling, intense, or unbelievable Israel experiences that Shelley has throughout the book. We here in Israel have all felt some of the pain, sorrow, and frustration, as well as the spiritual elevation, excitement, and love for Israel that Shelley does. So I feel like, for better and for worse, An Israel Odyssey isn't only my story, or all of us here in Israel's story, but it's also a book that's Israel's story.
Mm-hmm. So Batya, because you're having such a hard time explaining to us what the book is about, why don't you just read us a couple of excerpts from the book itself?
Okay, sure. The book starts off in the United States with some of the anti-Semitic experiences that Shelley goes through back in the 70s and early 80s and goes on through the years 2010. I'll start with one of the chapters in the very beginning. I'm not going to read whole chapters, just a little bit from some of the different chapters throughout the book to give you an idea. This is in August 1984. Israel, one of the editors blurted out in disgust, "Why would you take a vacation there?" "Yeah, why there?" A female reporter echoed the question with matching revulsion. Here we go again, I thought. I understood that none of them had any desire to spend their free time visiting a little Jewish country that was riddled with troubles and constantly fighting for its existence. I felt once more like the sore thumb sticking out. I was the out-of-place token Jew again. That was the only part of the conversation that mattered. Nobody cared about anything else except that I would be going to Israel. Suddenly, I didn't feel so comfortable standing as if on trial before those reporters and editors who were staring at me like I was from Jupiter. Drawing in my breath, I paused to think. I wanted to give a convincing answer that would reassure everyone that I wasn't crazy. But then one of my fellow reporters spoke up for me. "Why do you think she's going there?" His fat mustache rose and fell as he spoke. "She's Jewish. That's why." Well, I let out my breath. That pretty much sums it up. I knew I wouldn't have said that. I wasn't even sure myself why I wanted to go to Israel. I thought I was just curious about the country. The idea that I was going there based on the pure and simple fact that I was Jewish hadn't even crossed my mind. I hadn't considered any concrete reason or particular desire to attach myself to Israel or the Israeli people. I didn't know much about the place except that there were communal farms called kibbutzim, and that Israelis exported juicy oranges and little chocolate Hanukkah coins. At that moment, I also realized that the non-Jewish newspaper reporter standing next to me understood better than I did why I would be traveling 6,000 miles away from home to be in Israel instead of pursuing my new career as a journalist. But as the days grew nearer to my long-awaited trip, it became increasingly more important for me to discover for myself what was so special about that little dot of a country in the middle of the map, in the center of the world. Okay, so now here's a story from June 1986, part of the story when I'm already in Jerusalem. The Jerusalem Day procession was more exciting than I had imagined. Liz and I put on comfortable shoes, stuffed snacks into our backpacks, and joined the multitudes that came to celebrate the 19th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. Beginning at midnight from the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva in Kiryat Moshe, we joined the throngs of people making their way through the lively Jerusalem streets towards the Old City. I felt like we were all moving in a big wave, crossing like the ebb and tide of the sea, stopping at the red lights and rushing across with the green. When we reached the top of an upward-sloping road, I stopped to take in the panoramic view of the scores of people parading en masse before and after us. There seemed to be no beginning or end to the crowds moving forward. Blue and white Israeli flags were everywhere, flapping and fluttering above the bobbing heads or waving rhythmically from side to side. Group after group of celebrants singing Israeli and Zionist songs flocked past me as I watched, unable to pull myself away from the overwhelming scene. The last march that had a strong effect on me was years ago when the neo-Nazis had wanted to demonstrate in Skokie. Now I was participating in something that would make Nazis everywhere go crazy. All around me was more than just the survival of the Jewish nation. It was its amazing revival. Israel and all of Jerusalem, including the Old City and the Western Wall, were once again in Jewish hands. The Jewish land and its people were thriving and growing stronger every day, and there was no stopping us. I was sure that, like many of the Arabs in the country, the protesting Palestinian students from my university days would also be furious if they could see what I was witnessing now. As for myself, I felt like belting out what everyone around me was singing with great passion. Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Okay, so this next one is from January 1991, the Gulf War. It's called Scuds, Gas Masks, and Sealed Rooms.
Okay.
Though the first set of missiles Hussein sent over had landed far from Jerusalem, I was distressed by the fact that Yehuda and I and the rest of Malka's neighborhood had been completely unaware of the attack. I don't believe it. Everyone was up and in their sealed rooms, and we slept through the whole thing. There must have been a problem with the siren in our area, Yehuda figured. I was horrified. What if a missile had landed around here? Can you imagine? I don't believe this. Apparently, my cries echoed those of many others in the vicinity, for the neighborhood's loudspeaker was working extraordinarily well by the next attack. The siren rang out so loudly, Yehuda and I both jumped at its unexpected blare. It took an instant for us to absorb what was happening. Then something close to hysteria set in. Hurry, I instructed Yehuda, to the sealed room. Get your mask. Wait, I have to take out my contact lenses. I have to shave my beard, Yehuda exclaimed as he ran to get scissors from the drawer before ducking into the room, or the mask might not fit properly. You were supposed to do that in advance, I reminded him, slamming the door behind us. I know, wishful thinking. I guess I was hoping there wouldn't really be a need for any of this. Well, let's get this door sealed up first. I ran the palms of my hands over the tape on the edges of the plastic. Yehuda quickly reached up to the top of the door and smoothed the tape down with one hand while haphazardly cutting at his beard with the other. I searched around for my contact lens case, which had fallen from the shelf with all the rushing around. After what seemed like an eternity, the door was sealed. The space near the floor was stuffed with towels. Lenses were off. Beard was mostly cut. Gas masks and radio were on. Obviously, there's more to every chapter. Okay, I think this will be the last one I'll read just to get another idea of different aspects of Israel.
Okay.
This is the year 2008. The chapter is called Beautiful Flowers. Ima, you have to hear what happened this afternoon while I was on the bus in Jerusalem. Yael found me in the playroom making Play-Doh shapes with Ronit. We were riding on the bus towards the center of town, she began, when all of a sudden a woman who was just about to take a seat collapsed in the aisle. She was young and didn't look sick or anything. She just sort of fainted. That's a little scary. Yeah, but Ima, you have to hear what happened then. Yael sat on the edge of one of the plastic kiddie chairs. Right away, people got up out of their seats and rushed over to help. Two of the passengers picked her up from the floor and set her down across two seats. Then the woman's husband, who had just finished paying the bus driver, suddenly realized something was happening with his wife and hurried over to her. Yael paused to take a breath before continuing. The woman woke up right away, and everyone started giving the husband advice about what to do to help her. People were shoving their water bottles at him and saying she should drink. Maybe she was dehydrated. Others were pulling food out of their bags and backpacks, saying she should eat because it would give her energy. Yael's eyes lit up. I'm telling you, Ima, it was really wild. I can picture it. The bus driver heard all the commotion, but he was already driving again and didn't know what was going on. He called out from his seat, "What's happening? Does somebody need me to take them to the hospital?" Then the husband told everyone around him that his wife would be fine and that there was no need to go to the hospital. So she was okay. Yes, she seemed to be all right, but people kept handing her husband all kinds of things. He was holding so much food and so many water bottles, he didn't have a free hand to do anything. So an older woman who kept saying she needs to eat stuck some bread straight into the woman's mouth.
Oh,
Ha! I laughed. Then it was time for me and my friend to get off the bus. I saw that the wife was sitting up and drinking some water on her own. Everyone was going back to their seats, and the husband was thanking them for all their help. I heard the driver say, "Thank God she's all right." I guess he was glad he didn't have to rush the bus to the hospital. So that's just
These
part of
are
that story.
great,
Of course,
great
there's more to it.
stories. It's like they're little vignettes about life in Israel, but real life in Israel, including the crazy stuff, the beautiful stuff, the good stuff. I really love it.
Right, exactly. I think that one of the things that I think is special about this book is that there's inspiring, funny, and also thought-provoking stories. And that Shelley and her family and her friends, they remind us just what we have here in Israel. Because, you know, we can forget or take for granted all that Hashem has given us in this little country. And we can lose sight of the great zchut, the merit that we have to be here, and how every one of us here makes a difference. I remember after Yosef, my husband, and I were married, we went to visit our families in the States, and I was sitting in the living room with one of our family members, and who asked me why we had to live so far away. He said, "What difference does it make if you live in Israel or live here near us in the United States? What are you doing there that's so important that you can't do it over here?" And I told him what I knew for a fact was true. I said, just being in Israel, we're already doing something important, and we're making a difference. And, of course, that's also true today, that all of us here, just by going about our everyday lives, we're making an important contribution to the country and the state of Israel.
And to the Jewish people.
And I think that my book, For Better and for Worse, an Israel Odyssey, it brings out, like it says, the good, the bad, and the ups and the downs. But no matter what, we are here making a difference to improve whatever needs to be improved and to continue the process of rebuilding our country so that it will be like it once was in its glory. And hopefully the third temple should be rebuilt. And
Amen.
People here are going to be helping bring all of that on. And it's important that no matter what, we remain here. I think that Shelley Kaplan, through her journey, her Israel journey, she comes to understand that the strength of the Israeli people is in their faith, their strong bond to each other, and their everlasting connection to their land. And as she grows into her new life and slowly becomes more Israeli, she finds out that for every down we suffer here in Israel, there's an up. And for every reason we may have to cry in this country, there are many more reasons to laugh and to be happy. And she learned something that most Israelis learned for decades to do, and that's to keep on going no matter what, because this is our homeland. It's where we belong now and forever, in good times and bad, for better and for worse.
Batya, you asked me to play the song At Li Aretz, You Are a Land for Me, by Ro'i Yedid. Would you like to share with us why you chose that song?
Well, first of all, I think that it's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song written in modern days, and, here, like I said before, people can lose sight of what it means to have Israel, not just people in Israel, but also outside of Israel, that Israel really is, it's the basis right now in this world, I believe, for holding on to Judaism, the Am Yisrael. It's the center. It's the center of everything that's Jewish. And you can be living a nice Jewish life outside of Israel also, but the anti-Semitism is there, and it's everywhere. But in Israel, you have your own people protecting you, and you have Hashem, who's focusing greatly in Israel as well. And no matter what goes on here, we know that we have that. And it's so important that we don't ever lose our country and our faith. And that song is so important to say, this is, you're mine, you're for me, this country. And I think that it's for everyone, all the Jews of the world, that Israel is for, not just for the people living in Israel. And I just think that it's a very important song that we have in our hearts all the time, to remember that Israel is the Jewish homeland, and we're very, very lucky that we have it back in our hands again, and hopefully every part of Israel will again be back in our hands, and
Amen.
We'll feel free to go wherever we want and live here without fear and be able to build it up again to be like it once was.
Amen. So here we go, At Li Aretz by Ro'i Yedid.
ואני אשר בוכה עלייך, מרוב כאב אני שותק, מנסה לתפוס ידייך, אך בכוח מתנתק. את מארץ, את מקלט ובית, עלייך אני לא אוותר. את אצלי בלב פועמת, אין לי שום מקום אחר. מלמעלה אלוקים רואה ושומע, מלמעלה אלוקים ונוטע. מחר אור חדש יזרח, בכל מקום הלב יפרח, עוד נראה אותך שלמה, אני מבטיח לך מחר. ישובו הילדים אחרי שנות נדודים, את רק שלהם והם גם רק שלך. שנים רבות עלייך כאן נלחמנו, על אדמותייך דם נשפך, חיילים טובים איבדנו, לא נשכח ולא נסלח. חולם עלייך אהובה מושלמת, עוד נבנה את החורבן. יונה צחורה עכשיו רושמת שלום בשמי כחול לבן. מלמעלה אלוקים רואה ושומע, מלמעלה אלוקים עוקר ונוטע. מחר אור חדש יזרח, בכל מקום הלב יפרח, עוד נראה אותך שלמה, אני מבטיח לך מחר. ישובו הילדים אחרי שנות נדודים, את רק שלהם והם גם רק שלך.
Batya, now that you've tickled our fancy and our curiosity, how does a listener come about getting their hands on the book so that they can also be inspired by it?
Okay, so I have an e-store where there's a link that you can click on to order the book.
Okay, what is
those who are living outside of Israel.
What's the web address for that?
Okay, so it's www.createspace.com with another backslash and then the numbers 5605878. That's the link.
Okay, let me just repeat that for the listeners. If you want to find out more about purchasing Batya Kroopnick's book, For Better and For Worse, an Israel Odyssey, go into www.createspace.com/5605878. Again, /5605878. Batya, what if somebody wants to email you or contact you directly, not just about reading the book, but in general to share thoughts or ideas or ask questions?
Sure. It's For Better and For Worse. That's For Better and For Worse, not For Better or For Worse, as most people remember the phrase. It's For Better and For Worse .il Odyssey, ODYSSEY, @gmail.com.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat that. For Better and For Worse, that's all one word, no dots, no dashes. For Better and For Worse, .il Odyssey, ODYSSEY, @gmail.com.
Correct.
All
and
right.
obviously anybody in Israel can contact me to order books through that email as well.
Okay, so in other words, the website that you had given earlier is for people that live outside of Israel?
That's just for outside
And
Israel.
if you live
the
in Israel...
link is for outside
Okay,
of
and if you
Israel.
live in
Correct.
Israel, then you can contact Batya directly at her email address, and she can give you information
to order
about
the book.
Okay.
Also in Israel, it can be ordered through PayPal with the same email address.
Okay. Batya, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and reading us excerpts of your book. And I just want to wish you, that Hashem continues to bless you with success in your Israel Odyssey and with your family. And may you continue to find joy, even in the challenges, and continue to find blessings in every part of your life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in, and have a wonderful week.
ערוץ 6